Welcome, uh, welcome back to the newest lecture. We are going to study in this lecture end of history, right? We have just studied end of ideology, whereby we have understood that ideology in post-capitalistic society has lost relevance. Politics of today is of development, is of economy. Ideology is no longer relevant. Ideology is no longer relevant. End of history speaks about the same thesis in a different way, right? End of history speaks about the same thing in a different way. End of history is actually the vindication of liberalism as an ultimate ideology, right? Vindication of liberalism as an ultimate ideology. What does this mean? There's this saying or there is this view in Hindi, thappa lag jana, right? Thappa lag jana. So end of history is the same thing. End of history is trying to say that liberalism पे ultimate ideology होने का थप्पा लग गया है, right? It is the best ideology of all ideologies. It is an ultimate ideology. This is what end of history is trying to say, right? Now I'll start with something else. I'll not start with history. I will not start with ideology. I will not start with liberalism. I will not start with anything. But I will start with history. Right? History in political science. What does history in political science mean? Or what is history of political science? History of political science is history or movement of ideas, right? History of political science is essentially the movement of ideas. From Plato to Fukuyama, we have seen ideas moving ahead, right? Continuously, new ideas are coming and old ideas are fading away, right? This is history of political science. This is history of ideas. Political science, one of the interpretation of political science can be history of ideas, right? To explain this, I will take you to Hegel. What does Hegel say through his concept of dialectics? What is dialectics of Hegel? It is a dialectical idealism, right? Dialectical idealism, whereby Hegel sees history as movement of ideas. He sees history as dialectics between ideas. And for Hegel, ultimate ultimate idea is state. For Hegel, it is state. Right? The same concept was taken by Fukuyama. He says that dialectics, dialectics of ideas, dialectics of ideology, right? This concept of Hegel, dialectics of dialectics between ideologies has been done, right? It has been done, and liberalism is the ultimate ideology, right? This is what the idea of Fukuyama is, right? no longer no longer need to ponder over, no longer there is need to think on which ideology is the best, the ultimate. For Fukuyama, with end of Cold War, the discussion is futile, the debate is futile. Ultimate ideology is liberalism. Ultimate ideology is liberalism, right? To to justify his end of history. What does end of history mean for Fukuyama? That liberalism is ultimate ideology, right? To justify his end of history, liberalism as best ideology, what does Fukuyama do? Fukuyama does this one thing whereby he gives a historical background of liberalism, right? The first thing that Fukuyama do is give historical background of liberalism, whereby liberalism first won the conservative challenge to it, right? Liberalism was first challenged by conservative idea. What does conservative mean, right? So we know, by modern we know, you, me, anyone will mean enlightenment. Shit, sorry. Conservative challenges. The first challenge that liberalism won, or the first battle which liberalism won, we are studying. We are studying how Fukuyama justified liberalism as ultimate ideology, and the first first reason he gives is that liberalism. First reason is that liberalism has sustained many challenges. Right? The first challenge that liberalism sustained was of conservatism. What is conservatism? Conservatism is opposition to enlightenment. Opposition to enlightenment. Opposition to reason. Opposition to enlightenment. Opposition to reason. Right? And this was the battle that liberalism won. Against conservatism. Against conservatism. Liberalism won. How did it won? Because religion was faded, right? Religion was faded. Reason became rationality after enlightenment. Religion became secondary, right? And what became more important was reason, was science. So the first battle it won against conservatism, whereby enlightenment won, reason won, and conservatism took back took a back step, right? And conservative scholars such as Edmund Burke, people like Edmund Burke, conservatives like Edmund Burke, criticized new ideas, criticized liberal ideas, criticized rights and all those things. Right? You have heard about Robert Silver's patriarcha. You have heard about Louis XVIII's view on rights and all those things. So conservative challenge liberalism sustained, right? Whereby feudalism and traditional medieval system broke down and liberalism came to power. Capitalism came to power. So the first challenge that liberalism sustained was, or liberalism won, was of conservatism, was of conservatism. The next challenge, the next challenge was of was of totalitarian ideas and totalitarian societies of fascism and socialism. Right. The second challenge that liberalism sustained or liberalism overcome whereof whereof between between World War One and World War Two, of fascism and socialism. Liberalism overcome fascism as well and socialism as well. Right. And third the third battle that liberalism won was of was of socialism. Socialism till end of Cold War. End of Cold War. And with the end of Cold War, it was proclaimed that it was proclaimed that battle of ideologies has been won by liberalism. Right? Cold War is known as paradigm of battle of ideologies. Cold War is paradigm of battle of ideologies, and Cold War was won by liberalism. Liberal democracies like US and UK won, right? Unification of Germany happened, and Russia lost. With fall of Berlin Wall, with with end of Cold War, battle of ideologies was won by liberalism, and with end of Cold War, with collapse of socialism, liberal scholars started proclaiming victory of liberalism, of liberal capitalist economy and liberal democracy. Right? With collapse of socialism, with collapse of socialism, liberal scholars started proclaiming that capitalist economy and liberal democratic polity was best way of life. Right? This is what liberal scholars were saying. This is what Fukuyama said, and this is the first justification for his end of history thesis. Right? All this, that liberalism has sustained many challenges. The first challenge is of conservatism, second challenge is of fascism and socialism, the third challenge is of socialism, which it won in Cold War. With the end of Cold War, these were the challenges which were sustained by liberalism, and this was the first justification that Francis Fukuyama gave for his end of history thesis. This is the first justification, right? This is the first justification. The second justification was more philosophical, right? This justification was more of more of historical. The second justification is philosophical, right? The second justification that Fukuyama gave was this concept by Plato. Plato's concept of hymos. Thymos means spirit. It means soul, spirit or soul. So he took Plato's concept of thymos, and Plato has said that humans have two thymotic desires, right? The first thymotic desire is of basic necessities, and the second thymotic desire is of recognition. Humans have two thymotic desires. First is of basic necessities, second is of recognition, right? So, basic necessities. He compares socialism and liberalism here, right? He compares socialism and liberalism here, right? We are understanding justification that Fukuyama gives for liberalism to be an ultimate ideology, right? First, we studied historical challenges that liberalism sustained. Now we are seeing philosophical, we are saying philosophical justification of end of history thesis, whereby we are understanding Plato's concept of thymos, of desires, and how liberalism fulfills both of the desires, whereby we are going to understand now the fulfillment of appetite or basic necessities by liberalism, right? By liberalism. What is appetite or basic necessities? Roti, kapda, makan, food, 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 clothing, and a house, right? Food, clothing, and a house. To fulfill your appetite, what does Fukuyama say? To fulfill your basic necessities, what Fukuyama says is that the only way to fulfill basic necessities is capitalism. The only way to fulfill basic necessities is capitalism. This is what Fukuyama says. Why? Why capitalism is the only way? Why capitalism is the only way? Because capitalism facilitates innovation. With innovation, you can produce more, right? Production becomes easier if you are innovative, right? With with mechanized mill, with with mechanized mill, the production of cloth, the production of cotton cloth became easy with incoming of nylon. Production of ropes became easy with production, with innovation, with new innovations. Production becomes easy, and capitalism can produce more. If capitalism can produce more, then it can fulfill basic necessities easily, right? What happens with socialism is this. Socialism. Socialism. What happens in socialism is this, right? In socialism, is held in public. Everything is public ownership, right? Even if I have a lot of motivation, a lot of innovation, I am very creative, right? And I come up with a system whereby I produce a lot more than anyone else, right? I produce a lot more than anyone else. But what happens is that I don't get reward in proportional to that. Even if I even if I produce a lot with my innovation. I don't get I don't get a lot of uh, reward because of that. I don't get a lot of recognition. I don't get a lot of money because of my innovation, because everything is held in public, right? That is why capitalism or private sector is important. If there is capitalism, if there is private sector, there is competition. If there is competition, if people are in competition, the natural the natural thing is the natural thing is people will innovate, because if you are in competition, you would want to keep your price point as low as possible. To keep your price point to as low as possible, you would want you would want a lot of innovation. If you have a lot of innovation, you will produce more and things will become cheaper. This does not happen in socialism because there is no private sector, there is no competition, right? Socialism can Socialism can serve its people better, but only at the start, right? When you have less people, the distribution becomes easy, right? When you have a lot of people and there is no innovation, then everyone will get less money or less resources. Socialism, what is the problem with socialism, right? I will tell you problem with socialism. What is the essential problem with socialism? Essential problem with socialism is this, right? I agree that in socialism, there is equality, right? There is equality. But what is the problem with socialism? This is there. Equality in socialism you will find. But what is the problem? That everyone is equally poor, right? Everyone is equally poor. Their basic necessities are not are not being fulfilled. So this is the first justification, as we are saying, with help of Plato's concept of thymos, which Fukuyama gives of liberalism. That liberalism is best best way of life. It is best ideology. It is ultimate ideology because it fulfills basic necessities. This is the first justification with respect to Plato's thymotic desires. Now the second justification that Fukuyama gives with respect to Plato's concept of thymotic desires. The second thymotic desires for which history moves is recognition or thymos. Right? Recognition or thymos. What is recognition? Recognition is respect from others. Right? Recognition is respect from others. Hegel, for Hegel, it is an universal spirit. For Hegel, recognition, thymos, is universal spirit. Right? We have seen Nietzsche. Nietzsche has also talked about recognition, although in different terms. Nietzsche, Nietzsche says that Nietzsche, sorry, Nietzsche says that there are two types of person. There are two types of persons. The first type is the first type is megalothymia. People having megalothymia, right? That people want to dominate. This is the first type of person, right? Megalothymic people or people who want to dominate are driven by recognition. They are driven by will to power, right? They they will they will not. They will not back down. They will not back down from doing something, even if it can bring death to them. Right? This is how strong megalothymia is. There are people who wants to dominate. There are people who wants recognition. There are people who wants power. There are people who don't fear death. In the face of death, they will move ahead if there is recognition in the end of that. This type of people are having master mentality, and these people can move history. Right? Right? So megalothymic people having megalothymia in them are driven by recognition. The second kind of people that Nietzsche said there are isothymic people or isothymia. Isothymia talks about equality, right? Isothymic people don't have drive for recognition. Isothymic people have will to live, and isothymic people fear death. For them, living is more important than recognition, right? So these are two kinds of people, and recognition, megalothymia can also move history apart from basic necessities, right? So we were saying the justification of end of history as given by Fukuyama, justification of liberalism as an absolute ideology as given by Fukuyama, whereby we saw the first justification was that liberalism has sustained many challenges. Liberalism has overcome many challenges. The first challenge was of conservatism, second challenge was of fascism and socialism, third challenge was of socialism, whereby it overcame socialism. And liberal scholars say that capitalist economy with liberal democratic society is best kind of polity. Then we saw philosophical arguments whereby Fukuyama takes Plato's concept of thymos and justifies his end of history ideology, end of history thesis, whereby he says that humans have two thymotic desires. First thymotic desires is basic necessities, which liberalism fulfills, right? And socialism is not able to fulfill. Then he says that the second reason why there is movement of history is because of thymos. For Hegel, it is universal spirit. For Nietzsche, he says that people are moved by either domination, either megalothymia, either master mentality, or people want their basic needs fulfilled. They are happy in equality. So why history moves? Either for basic necessities or for domination. Right? In in liberalism, your basic necessities and your will to power, will to recognition, get us both of them can get fulfilled, and you don't have to go to war. That is why liberalism is best kind of system. This is what end of history is trying to say. Right? I am explaining to you the justification that Fukuyama gave. First justification was basic necessities get fulfilled by liberal system, and the second justification was that you get recognition in a liberal system. So your both of the basic necessities of appetite and of recognition gets fulfilled in a liberal system, right? Going ahead going ahead we see more justification from Fukuyama, right? We see more justification from Fukuyama, whereby he has given a small summary of evolution of history, evolution of history, for which he takes this concept of megalothymia, megalothymia, domination, will to power, nature, this concept of nature, right? And he says that the wars are due to megalothymia, are due to domination, are due to will to power, are due to recognition, right? Wars happened because some people had megalothymia, some people had master mentality for recognition. The people who had megalothymia, the people who had will to recognition started war, right? With wars, what happened? With wars, what happened is that there, with wars, the rulers or the people who wanted to dominate, the people who had megalothymia, they established industries, they established weapon industries, right? People with megalothymia established weapon industries. Now, with weapon industries, what happened was, with weapon industries, what happened was technology, technology became, technology became much better, right? Technology became better. With this technology, what happened was more industry got established. More industry, but not weapon industry, but but not weapon industry, but general industry. I will give you one example to make you understand what I'm trying to say. But general industry, right? With general industry, what happened was urbanization followed, right? Urbanization followed. With urbanization, what happened was was feudalism broke down, right? Urbanization followed. What is this issue of urbanization? That you become individualistic, right? Urban system makes you individualistic. You live in apartments and you don't know who is living just just outside your apartment, right? With urbanization, you become individualistic. With individualism, with individualism, what system comes? With individualism comes democratic system. This is what happens, right? This is what happens. This is the first stage, first stage of evolution of history, right? With wars came weapon industries. With weapon industries, technology became better. With technologies, general industries also came into picture. With general industries, urbanization came. With urbanization, individualistic nature of human became prominent, and with individualistic nature of human becoming prominent, democracy, democracy will be will will be there. Right, democratic system will come. Why I have given all this information to you, and how does it justify end of history thesis? Right, right. Uh, End of history thesis is justified. Is justified. Why? Because democracy came. Right, democracy. What happens? What happens is this. Right. We originally started with megalothymia. Right, megalothymia. In megalothymia, if you have megalothymia in a democratic system, you will face criticism, right? You will face criticism. In post-industrialized society, what what uh, Fukuyama is trying to say, that everyone will develop megalothymia. Everyone will develop megalothymia in post-industrialized society. And people, if everyone develops megalothymia, then people will criticize megalothymia. People will face criticism of megalothymia, and equality will be accepted. Don't worry, I'll give you an example and make you understand with an example. Right now, I'm just giving some background, but I will also explain by an example that what Fukuyama is trying to convey. Right, equality will be accepted, and equal dignity will be accepted. Right. Okay. Right. What this concept effectively means that equality will be accepted if everyone is developing megalothymia, then all will feel criticism. And what it essentially means that if if one is not able to dominate, no one should. No one should. Right? This is what Fukuyama is trying to convey. This is what evolution of history happened, and this is why liberal democracy is best kind of system, because it gives you equality, it gives you dignity, and it caters to your megalothymia, isothymia, both as well. It ensures that liberalism ensures that if one is not able to dominate, no one should be. Right. In essence, what does Uyama is trying to say? In essence, he's trying to say that liberalism or capitalism will bring democracy, and democracy will ensure that people will have their basic needs fulfilled, and people will have their will to recognition, their thymos fulfilled. That is why end of history is the best. Right, liberalism is the best kind of system. Right. I know this is a bit hard to connect, right? So, as I was saying, I will explain you the whole thing first, and then I will start with an example, right? Parallelly, I could have given an example, but I think I will explain you the whole thing again, and I will try to connect an example. So both things will happen at once, right? So we are studying evolution of history as given by Fukuyama, and this evolution of history, how it leads to liberalism to be the best ideology there is, to be the ultimate ideology there is. This is what we are trying to understand. What we are trying to understand, that with evolution of history, how how liberalism became the best kind of system, right? How history moved in a such a way that liberalism became the best system. That this is what we are understanding. Right. So Fukuyama starts with megalothymia, that people have will to power, people have will to recognition, people want recognition. That is why they go for war. I'll start with Hitler. Right. Hitler wanted recognition. Hitler wanted to be the messiah. People wanted to be the god. People wanted to be the someone who made the big change in Germanic life. So for this recognition, he went for war. Right? He went for war. Now, the biggest industries of Germany of that time were who? Were automobile makers. They were Porsche, they were BMW, they were Mercedes. Right? All these people, what did they produce during wars? They produced weapons, they produced tanks. Porsche, Mercedes, and BMW were originally who they were originally tank makers. They were originally jet engine makers, right? War ended. Hitler died. War ended. Hitler died. What these weapon industry will do? They will pivot to they will pivot to general industries because they have technology. They just have to apply that technology to general industries. And what what Porsche, Mercedes, and BMW do? They start they start working on cars, and they make absolutely the best cars in the world. German cars are the best, right? They start with making cars, right? Now what happens? These are big companies. They need a lot of people. They need a lot of workers. So around these factories, you will find a lot of urbanization happening. A lot of apartments will be there. With apartments, again, as I said, you don't know who is living beside your apartment. So individualism will be there, right? With individualism will come democracy, right? Right? Now, now, the society, the German society, which has seen how megalothamia is bad. Hitler was the worst person there is, and because of his megalothamia, because of his will to recognition, because of his will to power, Germany lost the war, and the a lot of missteps were taken by Hitler, right? So they understand that. That is why equality will be accepted. Equal dignity will be given to its people. You see, Germany today, Germany is one of the most egalitarian society there is, even though it once had a megalothymic maniac ruling them, right? The principle becomes what? The principle becomes this: that one, if one is not able to dominate, no one should be, right? This is the principle, that everyone should get equal say through a democratic system, right? So wars, weapon industry, with weapon industry come general industry. With general industry comes capitalism, comes liberalism. With capitalism and liberalism, democracy follows, and this democracy takes care of your both of the desires. That is desire of recognition and desire of basic necessities. Right? This was the justification as given by Fukuyama. Now, what we'll do is is just conclude the topic. How do you conclude the topic? You conclude the topic by whatever the original scholar has said, right? What Fukuyama said about end of history. He says that end of history is just vindication. It is just vindication of liberal idea of life, right? It is vindication of liberal idea of life. End of history is universal acceptance, that it is universal acceptance that liberal democracies are best way to live, right? But what end of history is not? What end of history is not? It is not end of events. End of history is not end of events, right? End of history, he says, it is not end of events. Events will continue, but we won't have anything to think about. Anything to think about, right? He says end of history is end of human existence. Why? Because why we are humans? Because we are thinking about something. If we have nothing to think about, then we are not human, right? If it is end of existence, then end of history is not joy, or it is not a moment of celebration, but it is a moment of mourning. It is a moment of mourning, and it is this view that we have we have become animals because we have become animals because there is nothing to think about. And he says that we are the last man. We are the last man, right? But what happens with any philosophy is that philosophy or theory gets some gets some recognition, right? Because of some event. What was the event that gave recognition to end of history? It was fall of fall of fall of USSR, end of Cold War, right? It was as Fukuyama said, the same thing happened, right? End of history got recognition due to Cold War, right? And liberalism was dominant ideology around the world till 2008. Now this is the event that 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 challenged end of history thesis, that challenged liberalism as an ideology. What happened in 2008 was global financial crisis and recession that followed, right? Even before that, what happened was 9/11. This event also challenged end of history, right? So people started calling end of history, is it really the end of thinking? So people got answers in no, because global financial crisis happened. People started leaning left. People started becoming ideologically uh, thinking again, right? People started thinking ideologically. People started thinking that there is inequality. People started thinking that the liberal democracy is not the best thing, whereby you see Thomas Piketty and his book Capital in 21st Century. He says that inequality is the basic feature. Inequality is the basic feature of a liberal democracy, right? Then there are scholars such as Alan Bodo, Seamus Milne. They have said in Rebirth of History, Revenge of History, they said that history will continue to think. Human will continue to think because events like global financial crisis will happen. Movements like Wall Street movement will happen, right? And and the situation is such that Francis Fukuyama in 2018 wrote this book Identity, and he says that he will say what, that identity politics he says that identity politics he says that right politics, right, rise of Trump, making America great movement, all these things has led to decline of liberal democracy, right? So life came full circle for Mr. Fukuyama, and you can see the endist argument that liberalism is the best kind of kind of system, best kind of system effectively fall flat. It falls flat because events that follow, and you see, me see, everyone can see the decline in liberal principles across the world. So this was end of ideology and end of history. We have finished end of ideology, end of history. We'll see the new topic in the new lecture. I hope you understood end of history in quite a detail. This was a very fun topic for me to study. I hope you understood and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for bearing with me and see you next time. And I'll start with Clash of Civilization of Samuel P. Huntington, and I will give some idea of how democracy is has evolved in four waves. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.